All right. So, how has your week been? Good? All right. Has anyone had any questions about access to information? Has anyone set up any alerts that we talked about last week? Has any
Um,
has Yeah, go ahead.
right. I recall, um, I think some of us had this issue where we would set up an alert for access to information, but then we would end up getting articles where even if it just included the individual words access and information, it would just include those as well in the alert. Is there a way to just ensure that we get access to information?
Well, I mean, all I did was I just typed in access to information, but I don't know if I put a hyphenated it, or you can put it in quotation marks. Livia,
Oh, I was just gonna say it worked for me when I put it in
put it in
quotation
quotation
marks.
mark. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you can do both, right? You can do access to information, which is federal, and freedom of information, which is provincial and municipal. So do both of those. Marina, you were going to say something?
No, I was saying put it in quotations, then you won't have, like, anytime you want to just search for a term, even if it's not access to information, put it in quotes and it'll only pick up that
Okay,
bit.
good, good. The other, oh yeah, I should address this before I forget. The textbook. I have been in communication with the bookstore. I forwarded the correspondence to you, and so have we had success in getting an electric copy? Or I believe there are hard copies in the bookstore, and you can get an electronic copy as well. So have we got
I
that?
was there yesterday morning for the data journalist, and they
Yeah.
didn't have any hard copies. I
Okay.
checked, yeah.
Okay. I'll email them again. I'm sorry. It's I don't know why this is so complicated, but it is. Um Anyone else have any problems? I'm just gonna put that on my to-do list. Uh Data journal book. Anyone else have any other problems that I should check into? Okay, I mean, the good news about the data journalist book, Andrew, is that we don't really get into data until next week and the week after. So it's not, it's not the end of the world, but you should have it. Okay. If there are any other problems, just please let me know. But the readings are really important. I can't stress that. One of the things that I will try to stress is to try to do is to put everything we talk about into a context, right? Pedagogical context. Like, why are we doing this? Like, we are talking about access to information. Well, why are we talking about that? Like, why is that important? Why is access to information important? Are we just doing this for an exercise, or does access to information say something fundamental about the practice of journalism and our rights as citizens?
In the book, it said that it holds governments accountable. So it's a
Yes,
way for us to, make sure that things are operating the way they should, and there's not secretive things going on behind closed doors that could be against what we want from our
uh,
elected officials.
absolutely, absolutely. Um, Marina.
It also allows for innovation. So for somebody that's not in the government or who collected the data to take a look at it, look at the trends, patterns, and ask questions of, who produced the data, or why is the data coming out this way, and what informed decisions can we make on that, like the Candor's database about aviation safety. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, we'll have a little bit more to say about that. That's really kind of cool. Andrew.
Yeah, I was also thinking if you were to find like a dead end and you're doing like a story and you've run out of information, like doing access into or information gives you more complete story and gives you all the facts where you didn't have it prior.
Yeah. Anyone else? And just jump in, by the way. You don't have to put up your hand, just kind of jump in and we'll use this as a free for all. Yeah. Who wants to go? Has anyone used access to information before this class? And if so, how? How have you done it? No one? No one's ever filed a request. Okay. Just give me 2 seconds here. There was a story that I just read in the Globe and Mail that was based on an access to information request. Oops. Okay, and let me share my screen. Okay, so this is a special to the Globe and Mail. Now, I don't know if Annie Burns Piper is actually working for them now. She used to be a colleague of mine when I was at the CBC. She did work at the Fifth Estate. And then she was with an investigative journalism institute, and she's also a photographer as well. So she kind of left and did her own thing, and now she ended up doing this story for the Star. I mean, for the Globe, but it's listed. She's listed as special to the Globe and Mail. So I don't know if she's freelancing or what, but this is a story near and dear to my heart. I will put the link in the chat, but it might be behind a paywall. I'll be sure to upload it to the syllabus as a PDF, and you can read it. But it's one of it has to do with this young lady here, Vanessa Young, who at 15 years old suffered a heart arrhythmia after taking a drug to treat what was described as a mild case of bulimia. Vanessa Young, holding Vanessa's photo is her father, Terrence Young. This was one of the first investigations that we ever did into adverse drug reactions, and really it's the story that got my data career going. And as is the case with any, with any story, it starts with a person. We can talk about data all we want, but if there's not a real person behind it, then it's kind of hard to pursue. Terrence Young was a federal conservative MP from Oakville, and essentially his advocacy, especially after the coroner's inquest into Vanessa's death, which I covered, it was in Hamilton, led to a bill called Vanessa's Bill. And it, among other things, it mandated hospitals to report adverse drug reactions. And it was mandatory. An adverse drug reaction, for those of you who don't know, is, we take a prescription drug, and it does something that it's not supposed to do or is unexpected. And the thing about drugs is that in clinical trials, the drugs are only submitted to a small sample of people. So you really don't know how they're going to react until they are circulated in the population writ large. And if there's anything untoward that happens, a manufacturer, for example, a pharmaceutical company, is mandated by law to report that information to Health Canada, and that the department puts it into a database, and that makes it accessible. Up until Vanessa's law became law, hospitals were not required to do that, because they argued that it was too much paperwork and all that kind of stuff. But now it is mandated, and it turns out that nearly half of hospitals fail to report adverse drug reactions despite laws requiring them to do so. Analysis of the data finds. And basically this is using access to information to get the information. So this is why a story like this shows up in your algorithm, right? December 2019, it became mandatory for hospitals across the country to report serious adverse drug reactions to Health Canada. The Globe and Mail obtained through an access to information request. Okay, so that's what shows up, right? That's what the algorithm catches. So the reason that is important for you folks to do this and to read the kinds of stories that are the result of access to information requests is because it gives you an idea, A, of the kinds of stories that can be told, the importance of the stories that can be told, and you can actually follow up, right? So if you wanted, you can email the the coordinator, and all of these links are on our syllabus. So you can email the Health Canada coordinator, okay? Paste this link to this story, right, into your email and say, I would like access to these records or to the data that led to this request. Now, the reason that you would do that and not rely on the exercise that we did last week, which is the completed access to information requests, is because, I don't know how long they've been sitting on this story. But if it was done fairly quickly, and I suspect that because it was an analysis of data, it took a while, okay? But I suspect that they'd want to do it fairly quickly, right? So that someone wouldn't notice the record, right? Through searching on this database like we did last week, get it, and then do a similar story. So there's usually a lag time of about a month or 2 months before, the time you typically see a story in the, in a media account and when it ends up in this data set. So what I try to do is to short circuit that is, I just email the office right away and ask them to send me the information, right? This link is on last week's list of links, but I've just popped it into the chat again. Right. So it's a really good kind of educational experience just by reading these stories, because you get a sense that, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of, stories about how the access to information system doesn't work. It's slow. There are too many exemptions. But I think that it's our job as journalists to learn how to use it efficiently and properly and strategically, right? And hopefully that's, that will be our big takeaway from this week, so that when you move on from this particular course, you'll have a good appreciation of how the Act works, how it's supposed to work. You'll have some good examples. And hopefully you'll be, filing your own requests regularly. Okay, so that's that was a really good story. And if we go back to the syllabus, and let me see here. Okay, so because all the access to information links were from last week. So if we scroll back up to week 1, okay, this is the Globe and Mail. The Globe and Mail has speaking of the Globe and Mail has a series called Secret Canada. And I'll just pop this in the chat, just if anyone's having trouble following. Okay. And what the Globe and Mail has done is Tom Cardoso and Robin Doolittle have worked with their data people to basically construct a database of all access to information requests across the country. Now, we already know that at the federal level, you can mine this completed access to information requests system, right? So you can plug in a search term, and if you see something you like, and there have been pages that have been released, you can click on the number, and then you can just you can make an application for the records. You get it. The acknowledgement is sent to your email address, and Bob's your uncle. You've got it. Okay. So the fact that the Globe and Mail, is links to this, it's for people who don't already know how to do this. But where the Globe and Mail's search really comes in handy, okay, is they allow you to search for previously released requests, say in Ontario, right? So if you click on Ontario, you can see what's been released, and then you can file a piggyback request. Okay. So to me, that is the real, I think, advantage of this. But not only Ontario, but you can do the same thing for municipalities as well. So if we scroll down here to Toronto, right, you can do the same thing. All right. And it gets really granular, right? So this city of Toronto, disclose in part, all emails, briefing notes, and memos that relate to Trinity Bellwoods from the following: Brad Ross and Chris. Okay, I don't know, but still, it gives you an idea, right? So if you were interested in this, you just file a piggyback request, and you have to pay. So unlike the federal system here, where you can file a request for something that's been released, you don't have to pay. But at the provincial level, you do have to pay. Okay. But as we learned last week, okay, if we take a look at the provinces, okay, so in BC, you can search for completed requests, but the beauty of it is that the government actually uploads the actual document or database to its server. So you don't have to wait. Okay. The same thing for Manitoba, the same thing for Newfoundland, Labrador, the same thing for Nova Scotia. So there are an increasing number of provinces and a handful of municipalities, such as Calgary, such as Halifax, right, such as Ottawa, such as Toronto, right, that list summaries of what's already been released. So, and Vancouver and Winnipeg. So when I talk about learning how the system works, we only get a right to complain if we've done all of our homework, we've learned how to use it strategically, we filed lots of requests, and we're still finding holes in the system, right? But if we don't use it in some of the ways that we're preaching in this class, then it doesn't do us a whole lot of good just to complain writ large that the system is broken, because I don't accept that, right? And all you have to do is look at all of the alerts, right? So these are a list of all my alerts, right? And there we go. Here's the Globe and Mails, right? Nearly half of hospitals fail to report adverse drug reactions despite laws requiring them to do so. Okay. Alberta Premier to address E. coli outbreak. All right. Look at all these stories that are done on a regular basis that would not have been done without access to information. So that's why we've spent last week and this week, and we'll always pivot back to this throughout the remainder of this course, because I think that it's pretty darn important. Okay. All right. A link that I would draw your attention to is something called National News Watch. National News Watch is, we have to get into good habits. You are Masters of Journalism students, so one of your responsibilities is to read the news, but not only read the news as sort of passive consumers, but read the news for tip sheets, as tip sheets, and to find out what's going on, right? So one of the things that I do every day, and I bookmark this, is I check in with the National News Watch, which is a national, the person who runs National News Watch is based in Halifax. And this is all of the kind of political news of the day from the Canadian Press, from the Globe and Mail, the Toronto Star, the CBC, et cetera, et cetera. So this is something that you should be perusing, okay? For example, Ontario, let me see. So let's take a look at this one. Ontario 2018 mandate letters told ministers to limit climate law impact on business. Okay, so this is global news. Ha ha ha. Okay. Okay. Anyone know what a mandate letter is? So when a minister is given a portfolio, what would a mandate letter be? Think of the word mandate letter. If you're given a mandate to do something, what does that mean? If I mandate you to do something.
You're being ordered to do something?
Absolutely. Okay. So Ontario is one of the few jurisdictions that does not does not make its mandate letters public. Whereas at the federal level, and just let me, and again, all of this stuff is on our open data website, but on our website, but I'll just give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So federal mandate letters, I'll pop these in the chat. Okay, they're basically marching orders, right? So let's take a look at the mandate letter for the finance minister. Okay, Chrysler Freeland. Okay, or let's see if, okay, so the new mandate letters are not out yet. So these are the old mandate letters, because I'd love to see what the mandate letter is for, say, the new housing minister, Sean Fraser, right? Or some of the new ministers who are in charge of really hot portfolios. Okay. So, what the mandate letters, is their marching orders. And they tend to be fairly motherhood, right? You should preside over peace, order, and good government, right? But specifically, they might have instructions to do specific things. And when the Liberals came to power in 2015, they made, as part of their effort to be more transparent, they made mandate letters public. In Ontario, that is not the case. So in Ontario, mandate letters are a guarded secret. They're a state secret. And journalists have complained about this. So it seems as though the Global News has done a story based on these mandate letters. Okay. And there are I would argue that it wouldn't be a story unless, if these letters were made public, the Global News probably wouldn't have bothered with this. Okay. So again, this is yet another example of a media outlet employing the strategic use of a legal tool that we have. Okay, but it has to be, but you have to think about it. You can't just fire off a request and if you don't get anything back within an allotted time, say, well, conclude that the system doesn't work. Okay. So anyway, but it really starts with, these alerts and then reading the stories. If you're interested at the federal level, you can contact the, department directly, ask for the records that 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 were used to tell a story and that you're drawing their attention to, and they're really good. You can probably get something back within the next couple of days. Now, I guess it begs the question, why would I ask for records, right, that have been used to produce a story? Like if Annie Burns Piper has already done this story, or if, these folks have already done this story, why would I bother? Why wouldn't I just move on?
There could be something else in the data that someone's missed. Normally, it's a huge amount of information. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's low hanging fruit, right? So for this one, okay, this was a fairly lengthy story. It was probably about 2,000 to 3,000 words, which is long. It was not top of the fold, but it was on the front page, and then on the back page, it took up an entire section. So it was a fairly robust effort, but I'm sure that there were all kinds of trends that Annie didn't delve into, maybe because she didn't have the time or the space. But there's all kinds of hospitals. Obviously, hospitals are named. The hospitals that are reporting or not reporting. So, if you wanted to localize a story like this, you can just talk about the hospitals in your catchment area and find out why they're not reporting adverse drug reactions, and you got a story. Okay, that's a good follow to this. So that's why this is a really good way to do it. And it's like, what we like to call in the business low hanging fruit. And as long as you get into a really good habit, you can do stories like this on a regular basis. And the nice thing is that once your assignment editor, knows that you're doing stories like this, they'll even hit you up to say, hey, can you file a request on this or that? And they become dependent on you to do original stories. And then you're off to the races. And then you tend not to be assigned stories based on whatever, right? You can do more original stories, which I'm guessing is one of the things that you folks are hoping to do once you graduate, is to do original stories, right? You don't want to follow the pack. You want to do your own thing. So that is a really good, system to use. Okay. So this, these have been really interesting stories. So, do you remember when these balloons were flying over the Canadian territory, and we thought they were spy balloons. We thought they were spy balloons from China. Some people thought they were UFOs, unidentified flying objects, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of interesting, right? So you might think that, okay, UFO. I mean, come on, right? Really? Well, not so fast. So, and then there's another story here that CTV News ran, which, it's the tenure of the story is that these unidentified aerial phenomena or or UFOs, it was reported to the Prime Minister's office. Well, whoops. Sorry about that. Was reported to the Prime Minister's office. Well, I mean, is that worth a news story? Now, my teaching partner at Carleton, Jim Bronskill, does not think that that's a news story, because he got this document, and this is the document here. This is uploaded to Document Cloud. I will show you how to use this. It's a really good way to display documents, because he got this document as well, and he chose not to do the story. So the fact that the Prime Minister this information was shared with him, is that worth the story? What do you think? A UFO sighting is shared with the Prime Minister's office. Is that a story? Would you do a story on that?
Not really. I think it's a bit of a weak story. I'm more interested to hear what the Prime Minister says about the UFO, as opposed to it was just brought to his attention.
Okay. Who else?
I
Anyone
mean,
else?
on the other hand, it's like the locals don't know about it, so it's the journalist's job to like disclose that information, even like though it's silly, you know,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm.
just the freedom of information, which is like this is
Okay. Okay. Anyone else?
I feel like it's probably good for readership because people are very like into this kind of stuff, so they would read it. So even just for the sake of like, I don't know what the word would be, marketing for the paper or whoever published it.
You know, that's a really interesting point because, uh, you know, as you will learn, the new journalism business model is for publications to exist behind a paywall. And one of the things that publications are doing at a time when we're, discussing the future of journalism and Meta's campaign and Google's campaign to not become part of a law that forces them to pay for content and all that kind of stuff, right? And this has led to an existential discussion about what are we doing as journalists and how come people are consuming our products and whatnot. And and what that's meant for us at Canada's National Observer and other media outlets is actually it's having an effect that kind of surprises us. And that is that subscriptions are going up. Like people are realizing, oh, we have to pay for this content. And they're doing that. So, you know, you have to put something in the table. Like when you're doing a campaign to get new subscribers, you need to put something in the window. And what we do and what other media outlets do is what they put in the window is their original stories. One of the easiest ways to get an original story is to strategically use access to information. And we've spent the last few minutes talking about the fact that it's really not that hard if you're committed to it, and it starts with these alerts. Okay. So yes, Jim got this document. He decided not to do anything with it. Because he and I had an email exchange about this because I was wondering, because I was telling him that I wanted to show this story to you folks, and we were debating this on the weekend. He said he wouldn't do the story. I would do the story. Now I wouldn't not like they went to town on this. I don't know that I would have given it as big a treatment, but I still would have done a little story on it. But here's what I would have done. And, we will talk a little bit more about this when we get into open data. But I would ask myself, okay, so UFOs, how can I get more data on UFO sightings? So if someone sees what they think is an unidentified flying object in the sky, who would they report that to? Now, I'm not expecting you to know the answer because it's not obvious, right? So you would report it to, so who would be responsible? So who's responsible for air transport in general? What department? Federal.
is it NORAD?
NORAD
GPS.
is a strategic alliance. So it wouldn't be NORAD. It's in the name, Transport Canada. Okay. So that's why one of the first things I urge you folks to do is to learn what government departments are responsible for what. Okay. And so when you're looking at news, your first question is UFO. Okay. When there's a UFO sighting, what happens? Who reports to whom? And that question will lead you to some of the answers that we're discussing. Okay. So the air navigation system, Nav Canada, is responsible for air navigation. You've all been on flights, right? And so you're landing at Pearson, you're taking off from Pearson. That doesn't happen until the air traffic controller in the towers, right, gives the green light to do that. Now, anytime there is what's called an incident, those air traffic controllers are mandated, unlike, just like hospitals and just like drug companies for adverse drug reactions, those air traffic controllers are mandated by law to report that information about that incident to Transport Canada, which keeps it on a database called CADORS, right? So it's the Civil Aviation Daily Reporting System. All right. And here it is, right? CADORS. How is the information used, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So it's data. And so you can go to the CADORS website, which is here. So is everyone here? Do this with me. Is everyone here? All right. And click on query. We'll have more to say about open data in the weeks to come. But I wanted to show you how I would use this to make this even a better story. Okay, so we have CADORS here, and it's data, right? So if you want to, you have occurrences, if you want to look at accidents or incidents where, and then you can filter by province, you can filter by region, okay? And so if we go all the way down to the bottom here, so this is what's called a relational database, right? So this would be the occurrence information would be one table. The events would be another table. The aircraft information would be another table. And the occurrence summary, the narrative field, will be another table. Right? And what Transport Canada does in its server is it uses the CADORS number, this CADORS number, that is common to each one of these tables. So you can see that has a CADORS number, right? They all have CADORS numbers to link the information so that when I plug, something into the search engine, it will produce records. So type in UFO into the narrative field. And I'm not limiting it to dates or anything. There were 41 records, right, where there were sightings of UFOs. And I like this one in particular because this was in my neck of the woods. And my connection is a little slower than I would like it to be. Okay, so Carp is near Ottawa, right? And if I go down to the narrative field, an unidentified flying object sighting in Carp and Kilbourne, Ontario area. Object was silver, like a balloon with mechanical grooves. It had 4 blinking lights underneath, 2 in front and 2 behind. It was clear and noticeable. Now, I don't know about you, but that's pretty detailed, right? So, I heard someone from NASA yesterday talking about our universe, right? And our universe is vast, and we are but a speck in our universe, and there's who knows, right? So I'm not saying that this is pretty spectacular stuff. Now, admittedly, this was back in 2014. There would have been an investigation into this. Don't know what happened. But all that to say is that if I'm doing a story on UFOs, all I would do is I'd go to CADORS, right? I'd ask my question, well, how are UFOs reported? And is there any data on this? And that hopefully would have led me to the Cador's data set and the 41 entries, and I would have gone through, right, and just searched each one of them, and I would have rounded out a story like this with a section on Cador's and these sightings. Okay, again, low hanging fruit. So even if you wanted to, get a hold of this, and you can download this, because I would augment this with some of your information from Cador's and the most recent sighting, which was June 1st in London, Ontario. Okay. A member of the public at the Eglinfield Observatory reported seeing an unidentified flying object. The UFO appeared to be a string of overlapping semi-transparent spheres traveling south at high altitude, then increasing, then ceased being visible in an instant. Okay, I don't know about you, but I'd read that. If I start out this story with, a couple of these examples, I'd read the story, and then I would pivot to, oh yeah, and there was an instance when a sighting was reported to the Prime Minister's office, but it wasn't, but the reason being is that it had wider implications because NORAD was involved, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So this is a really good example. The other example is okay. So this is a Jim Bronsko's story, and this is underneath the Cador's menu. And so he did a story about a secret memo about. Whoop, hang on here. Oh, that's his. Okay. He did a story about RCMP cannabis use. Okay. And so click on this link here. Whoops. Oh, hang on here. There. Okay. So he did a story about the fact that the RCMP may, like, if you're an RCMP officer and you smoke pot, you've got to, there is a certain number of days when it's got to be out of your system. And so in this briefing note, they talked about the fact that policing organizations that initially had zero tolerance or a 28-day restriction have or are moving towards either a fit for duty 24-hour abstinence requirement or a combination of both. Okay. So this is the kind, when we talk about a briefing note, right? This is the kind of briefing note that is really becomes a staple of access to information requests, because what does a briefing note denote? I mean, last week we looked at question period notes, the briefing notes that are prepared for ministers when they stand up in a legislature, in a provincial legislature, or the House of Commons, which resumes on Monday. So there'll be lots of briefing notes for ministers on housing, on cost of living, and all that stuff, right? There's just a list of briefing notes that ministers are poring over right now. So a briefing note. So just to review, what is a briefing note?
A briefing note is talking points for the minister to use when they're asked such questions. And sometimes there are further notes saying, if you're pressed, here's what more info you could give. Yeah.
So really, it's an executive summary. Okay. And they all basically look the same. So there's the issue, right? And then there's the background. And then this is for and it's unclassified. And then there's a recommendation. Now, what's really interesting about this is that usually in briefing notes, recommendations are whited out. They are excluded. Using exclusions in the law such as, well, it's cabinet confidence, or, if we revealed our recommendation, then that somehow would compromise government operations. But here, the recommendation is to update the current 28-day restriction for all safety-sensitive positions, with the exception of specialized groups, to 24-hour restriction on the use of recreational cannabis prior to working. So it means that if you're an RCMP officer and you want to smoke a joint a couple of days before your shift starts, you can do so. Okay? And in consultation with Dr. Peter Guilford, Chief Medical Officer, blah, blah, blah. All right? So there's a lot of information here. So what I would do is, okay, so Jim has done this story. And, this is what he got the story that, now this was a briefing note title that he asked for, and I will show you how to do this after the break. So this was a briefing note title, and so he did the story, and it was a good story, right? The Mounties, the length of time that the Mounties have before they can smoke pot and work is going to be reduced, right? And that's a major story. So that story is done, and you figure, well, what's the point, right? Well, the reason that you would want to get a hold of the briefing note is that's in consultation with these people. So then I would do like if I'm a chase producer for a CBC morning or an afternoon show or CTV or whatever, and you wanted to do a follow-up on this, why not talk to one of these people who are consulted about the policy? Right? That would be a really good guest to get. Again, low-hanging fruit. Again, the strategic use of this as a tool for information. Okay? So that's a really good example. So any questions on anything that I've discussed so far? What are your thoughts? Any thoughts? Useful?
Yeah, I think it's useful. I like how you showed us how to get like a follow-up story, for example, like going with the doctors that they consulted, and this is how you can kind of make the article more detailed, like zoom into a certain aspect of a request and then create like a whole new story out of it. Like it's easier than I thought it would be.
Yep. I'm glad you said that, because it really is, I mean, it's fairly easy stuff, but it's just rewiring your brains, to think a different way, to think, okay, where does information come from? And just to ask yourself basically some different questions that can really be, I would suggest, revolutionary. Okay. So yes, it's important to go to news conferences and conventions and conferences and whatnot, and report what's being said. But this kind of helps you get beyond that. Okay. Any other feedback? Yeah, Andrew.
I have a question about document clouds. So you shared us these PDFs. How do you actually get access to them? Are they publicly available on like a website or something?
So I will, what I will do is I didn't want to overwhelm you the first week. So I will send you an invitation to get, so let me show you how Document Cloud works here, just very quickly, but we will get into this in subsequent weeks. Okay. But I'll just give you a sense of how this works. Okay. I'll just share my screen. Okay, so this is Document Cloud here, okay? And so what you can do is you can upload documents to, and these are all of my students who have accounts, okay? So you can upload documents. And then what you can do is you can create folders for different subjects. All right? So what I what I really like doing is uploading, say, budgets. So every time there is a budget, okay, I will upload the budget, a federal or provincial budget, and I will you can create annotations. Okay. And this comes in really handy because you're, like if you want to think, oh, geez, what was that housing policy in the last budget? Okay. It's right here. It's uploaded to Document Cloud. You can access it from wherever you are. And here's the annotation right here. You annotate it, and then you can go from one annotation to the next. Okay. You can make these annotations private, or you can make them public. And the other nice thing is that when you're, in your story, if you want to hyperlink to a specific annotation, you'll see that the last few numbers on this URL, right, constitute the ID number for this annotation. So if I copy this and if I paste it into a browser, boom, it takes me right to the annotation itself. Right. So the advantage to that is quite often news stories, they will link to it will be an announcement of a policy, or it will be the citation of a number, right, that's gone up or down. And it will link to a PDF, like a 300-word PDF. You have no idea where that number is. Okay, your reader has no idea where that number is. And obviously your reader does not have the time to read a 300-page PDF, right? So what you want to do is you want to annotate that number. And so you can go right to it, right to the number, right to the quotation. Okay. And it's a way for your audience, and it's a way for your editors to fact check your work as well. Right. So that's what CTV did, right? They used Document Cloud, the same kind of thing. But they just linked to the actual document because it's only a few pages. Okay. So that's what Document Cloud is. But I will send you'll all get an account, and I will show you how to upload and annotate.
Can I add one thing on the Document Cloud? You'll get it. Last year it was you get an invite link, and that's how you register, but you'll have to make a general account with, I would recommend your personal email, so that when your Ryerson account or TMU account expires, you'll still have access. But there was a couple issues we had last year with that, so I'll be here for technical support for like making the account and making sure you have access when we get to that.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Lena. Yeah, you're right. One of the reasons I've asked you for your Gmail account, and I think everyone has sent me your Gmail accounts, but if you haven't, please do so, is because I use your Gmail address for this. So it means that when you leave this place, you can have access for as long as you want. Okay. And I also use your Gmail. Yeah. So that's your Gmail address. But yeah, Alina is right. It's become a little bit more complicated because there are different people who are administering this, but it is a phenomenal tool. It's a great way to organize all of your documents. It's been a game changer for me. And I use it for all of my columnists, all of the stuff that I edit for Canada's National Observer. If it's a PDF that's on a website, I will download it. I will upload it to Document Cloud. I will ask them, oh, geez, where's that number, that you're citing, or where's that quote? And I can go to it, and I ask them for the page number. I can see that it's correct. Most of the time it is correct, but sometimes they misquote, or sometimes it's, oh, geez, I can't find the number. I don't know where it is, right? So it's a really good editing tool as well. Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the difference between a formal request and an informal request. So what we've been doing up until now is informal requests, right? So what does that mean? Informal. What do you think it means?
More casual, like less high stakes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's still a fairly rigorous process, but it is asking for information that has already been released. Okay, so it's informal. So that means that if I make the request for the cannabis information, for Jim Bronskill's briefing note on cannabis, or the CTV note on UFOs or whatever, if the department in question, be it the RCMP or the Privy Council Office, which is the bureaucracy responsible for liaising with the Prime Minister's office, okay? If they take a really long time, if they take more than a month to get back to me with the document that I've asked for, I do not have the right to complain. I can't file a complaint to the Federal Information Commissioner. I don't have that right. But on the other hand, I don't have to pay for it. So at the federal level, you have to pay you have to make a request, you pay $5, and that's it. And for an informal request, we saw whether or not you're asking for a question period note or a previously released briefing note, you don't have to pay any money, right? You go to the website, you go through the requests that are of interest, you click on it, and then you fill out the form, you get an acknowledgement, and you're good to go. Now, in some cases, some departments are really good at getting back. Like I've said before, public safety, which is responsible for the RCMP, the Canada Border Services Agency, the spy agency, the RCMP, it gets back to you fairly quickly, which is surprising. You'd think that a big department like that was really busy would take some time getting back to you. It's pretty good. There are others, well, forget about it. It will literally take them months. Okay, a month, 2 months, 3 months. And so if that happens, all you can do is exert moral suasion. Hey folks, I sent you an email 3 weeks ago. Don't have anything yet, you know? And quite often what happens is that people are busy, right? This is something that is lower down in their priority list, right? The people in the access office are handling formal requests or requests that are more complicated, right? And so if it comes to a request that for a record that has already been released, that is not, and they know that they don't, that by law, they're not obligated to respond within a certain period of time, that's going to be lower down on the list. So again, as we talked about before, your strategic use of this law should be, I am not going to let that fester and hang around. So fire off an email, very politely worded, asking them. And
sorry, can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, do you want to? I was just wondering if you could clarify a little bit about the Secret Canada and what it means to piggyback off a request. Is that also information that's already been used, or are you adding your voice to requests that haven't been fulfilled?
That is information that has already been used. But unlike the federal system, at the provincial system, if you are piggybacking on a request, so it basically means that you're taking that summary, you're sending it to the department, and you're saying, give me this information that has already been released. Okay, but you still have to pay $5 for it, which is, I don't agree with that, but at the federal level, you don't have to. Or for those jurisdictions that proactively release all of their records, not just the summary, but they actually proactively release the actual information, be it a briefing note or data, you don't have to worry about that. You get it for free. But at the Ontario level, this is a pretty big deal that the Globe is doing this for Ontario because it's the largest jurisdiction. And it's presided over by a government that doesn't believe in access to information, quite frankly. And we can see that there are a number of decisions that were made. And we can talk about this a little bit more during the break. Earlier this week, it was revealed that there was a climate crisis report that the government had commissioned that was done in January and just was released on the government website just a few days ago without any fanfare or what. There was no news, news conference, no news release. I mean, what? I mean, it's crazy, right? So, or mandate letters for ministers, which are marching orders that are released at the federal level. And I think that most, if not all of the other provincial and territorial jurisdictions release mandate letters, but not in Ontario. And we can see with the with the climate crisis report. We can see what's happening with the green belt. We can see what happens when transparency isn't there. And it's no secret that I would say Ontario's freedom of information law is among the weakest across the country. And that has a direct relationship to democracy, our right to information, our right to inform our citizens. Right? So, I see our strategic use of access to information as the connective tissue in democracy. And I don't think I'm overstating that. I really do. And that's why it's one of the first things that we dig into. Okay? Because our ability to know what's going on. Now, even at that, there are going to be all kinds of exemptions, right? Where they're going to keep information from you. And we'll talk a little bit about, more about those at after the break and in subsequent weeks. So you'll see, for example, and I'll just share my screen again. So you'll see, in the case of the, right? So this is the UFO one, okay? There are all kinds of redactions here, right? And then what they do is I haven't seen the actual letter that has the wording of the request, but what they will do is for each redaction, they will cite the section of the act that was used to withhold the information. Okay, section 69, this one here means that even if you, and it's this one right here, because it goes in sequential, it's either this one or this one. Even if you want to complain, if it's a section 69, not even the information commissioner has the right to see it. Okay, cabinet confidence. It's like, nope, it's falls into a black hole. Not even, and that's one of the reforms that users of the act have been pushing for. Okay. And then here, section 15 was used to exclude this information. So typically, you remember when we looked at the list of, let me see here, the information requests. So let's just go back here. Right. And we can see that, let's see, for this one, right? Disclosed in part. So when we see disclosed in part, it means that your record that you get back is going to look like this. So this means disclosed in part. Now, does that mean to say that there's nothing there? Well, as we saw in let me see here. In Jim's story, Jim Bronskill's story, okay, about the cannabis, that if you read them carefully, okay, and this is actually not a bad one. Like I'm surprised that this briefing note here, it's pretty good, right? But usually what you're looking for is a line or two, right? That you can use as an impetus to tell a story. But this one's actually pretty good. I would say that this one was disclosed. Yeah, all of it was disclosed as opposed to this one. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so informal means that you don't have to pay anything except in Ontario, where you're piggybacking for something that's previously released. But essentially it means that you're asking for stuff that's already a matter of public record. And we've seen that is not an entirely useful exercise. I would argue the opposite. I would argue that it's easy, it's low-hanging fruit. doesn't cost you anything for the most part, and you can probably get a story out of it, or if not, just use it for background. And if you use it for background in a story that comes up about that particular topic, you can reference your background information as, you know, information you obtained through a previously released access to information request. That shows up in the algorithm. It looks good, right? It shows that you are a purveyor of original journalism. Okay, and that's good. So that's an informal request. A formal request means that you actually have to write a letter, or you have to ask for something specific and you've got to pay. So at the federal level, how much does it cost at the federal level? Any idea?
Isn't it $5 as well?
$5. $5 at the federal level. And at the provincial level, it typically is $5, although BC, it is now $10. And in Alberta, it's $25. It used to be $25 in Nova Scotia. It is now $5. And it used to be in Ontario, it's $5. I think it used to be more. So, but it's still a lot of money. Now, at the federal level, all you pay is $5. So one of the reforms, not many of them, but one of the reforms that the federal Liberals made is that all you have to pay is your $5, right? So it doesn't matter how long it takes the officials in question to get the information. All you pay is $5. Whereas at the provincial and municipal level, and at the municipal freedom of information laws are a creature of the provincial laws. Okay. So all of the rules and regulations that dictate what you can get from a municipally based organization, like Toronto Metropolitan University, like a hospital, et cetera, is governed by the provincial law. And so if it takes, let's say it takes them 30 hours to find the records that you want and go through them, then they're going to charge you, say, $25 to $30 an hour. And Marina, Alina, you've been through this, right? So can you, I might be putting you on the spot here, but I think you can handle this. Can you talk a little bit about the fees that you've been charged?
Sure. Yeah, so a lot of the requests that I was doing was related to a story that was published earlier this year on hate crimes on post-secondary campuses. So all of my requests were with the provincial level of colleges and universities, like that department. And those guys are really stingy with what they want to give you unless you want to pay them extra money. So I've had a lot of back and forth where I was charged upwards of like over $100 for accessing requests. And the annoying thing is they've already like compiled the information for you and they're like, we have it, but you have to pay us money to see it because it costs us labor to compile it, which is their job. So it doesn't really make any sense. Luckily, because I was a student and like you guys are all students, you can get a fee waiver and you can just ask like, I have no money, I'm a student, this is for a class, this is for, you know, journalism, please don't make me pay this much money. And usually they either waive it for you or they reduce it by like a gigantic amount where you have to pay like 10 extra bucks and then they'll give you all the information they have. But it's a lengthy battle sometimes. But usually they cave in because they don't want you to do an appeal. And an appeal is when you like have to provide proof of income and like a tax slip so that they can see that you're not making enough money to reasonably pay for it. But because that takes a lot of their time, they actually prefer to negotiate, I found in my experience, to kind of either reduce the fee or do some kind of fee waiver. So it's frustrating, but it works.
There's her name. There's her name.
Yeah.
So when Alina was in my investigative class, she was one of the people who worked on this story. And so this is the story that she's talking about here.
Yeah, and for this one in particular, I got a files from credit because I spent like a year with David's help negotiating for data from the Toronto Police, and they were like, it was a disaster on the Toronto Police side because they didn't know what they were doing for the most part, and it was just a very complicated it was an easy request, but for them, for some reason, it was really complicated, and they tried to charge money. And I got it waived, but they did end up using some of those numbers in the story, which was pretty cool. And that was like my first experience having something I spent a year trying to get information on finally featured in a story. So this stuff works, and it gets you bylines.
Yeah. And, you know, so this story is part of Surviving Hate, a collaborative journalism project that seeks to fill the gaps in Canadian hate crime data. The project is coordinated by the University of Toronto's Investigative Journalism Bureau, Humber College's Story Lab. Contributors of other surviving hate stories include Canada's National Observer, TV, Ontario, and JSource. So this was this story took us a while, but it was a pretty important one. Okay. And again, the strategic use of access to information. If we didn't, you know, now we use informal and formal, right? Informal meaning that we, you know, so we asked ourselves the question, when there is an incident on campus of hate or whatever, what happens? How is that reported? Well, it turns out that many universities and colleges actually keep not only statistics, but they actually survey their students about their well-being. And a lot of this information ends up in those surveys. And so we asked basically, I think almost all of the colleges and universities across the country for those surveys. We put the information in a structured data set, and we found trends. And we found that, in fact, there were a lot of reports, and the incidents were actually increasing. Okay, so yeah, we use informal and formal, but for the process that Alina is talking about, what happens is that, you know, when you file your requests, that's only the beginning of the process. It might, and that's why we stress that when you are, you know, crafting a request, that the wording be as precise as possible, that your timeline be reasonable, like you're not asking for like 5 years worth of information, that maybe you limit it to briefing notes and not email correspondence. If you want email correspondence, then you want to hide that off into a separate request and only for a very limited period. Maybe a couple of days or whatever, but not a year. Because otherwise, if it's at the federal level, you won't be charged, but you'll be hit with an extension of literally like 260 days because it takes them so long to go through that information. Or if it's at the provincial level, they'll hit you up not only with an extension, but they'll charge you for it. And they will charge you hundreds of dollars. Right? So again, the strategic use of access to information or freedom of information dictates that you have to be very precise with your wording. Okay.
I'm here for help when we get to the assignment. I'm here for help when it comes to wording or like any advice about departments or trying to figure out who to get the request from or what information you're looking for. Like if you're not sure how to phrase something, more than happy to help.
Okay. All right. Any questions before we continue? All right.
I actually do have a question.
Yeah.
When you say make a separate request, is it like a separate request within like the same timeline? Do you know what I mean? Like if I make the request today and then I make my separate request tomorrow, if I do want access to multiple things, or is it like you choose what is most important?
It would be a separate request. So let's say that it's for cannabis, right? So I'll just share my screen again. So it's about the RCMP's use of cannabis, right? So we know that this briefing note, when was the briefing note? Received July 23rd. So it was in 2023. This briefing note went out and it said what it said. Okay, the date here is it looks as though it's May 31st. It was signed off by the Chief Human Resources Officer. But it was submitted a couple of months before, right? So we can see that this has been talked. So obviously this must have been talked about for a couple of months. So you might look at this and go, okay, that's interesting, but I wonder, there must have been a back and forth about this, right? Like this is fairly contentious. And you can imagine what the discussion would be. Well, if we do this and it could be controversial, do we want to think about this? And you might want to get a sense of that back and forth. So what you would do is, in addition to asking for this briefing note, you get the briefing note and you might follow it up with a request that asks for the email correspondence about this particular policy between this date and this date. It's very prescribed, right? Now, even at that, you could, typically, or you could ask for the email correspondence of the Sylvie Chateauvert and Nadine Huggins. You can just ask for the, maybe the briefing note, between, because it was submitted by this person and recommended by this person. So you might have to tailor it a bit. But the point being is that that between the date that it was submitted and the date that it was recommended, there must have been a conversation. And so you want to get a hold of that. So what I would do is I would file a separate request for the email correspondence that was generated by this particular policy, right? I would use this reference number, policy spelled out in the access request, and you would cite the actual number. Okay. Here's the reference number here, and you would cite it. And that's what I would do.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So any other questions?
If I may add, just some of this might be a little bit like a lot to process right now, but I do want to note that I want to send like a memo to all of you guys, just recapping like the basic talking points from today, the differences between the requests, provincial, municipal, whatever, so that in case you're a little lost, you'll have like a couple of really succinct notes that you can follow, just so that you can make sure you get it, and for quizzes, so that you'll have a little bit of a reference for like a study sheet.
Yeah. And so if we take a look at the access to information assignment, and we can talk about it. So the deadline is September the 18th, which is Monday. And I'm kind of thinking that, do we want to extend that deadline?
Yes.
And if so, and I'm happy to do it. And if so, how much longer would you need? What do you think?
I think that like before answering that question, I was just like looking at the rubric before class assignment, and like I understand like one of the things that we need to have in order to get like a higher mark is to have like clear evidence of tracking the progress of the request. How much time would it take in order for us to like have that like clear evidence of tracking the progress?
Really easy. All I need to see is evidence that the request has been received.
Oh, okay. So it's not like we have to have like personalized.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That's all I need, right? So, and I'll show you, I have actually uploaded examples of requests that I've made. So you can use those as your template. Okay. So I'm happy to change this date. So what do we want to change it to?
Would the end of next week be better for I'm curious what my peers think.
Yeah, I feel like by next class, maybe.
So how about midnight on Thursday?
Yeah, I think that's
September 21st.
I think the 21st is more than enough time.
September 21st. And let's say 11:59 p.m. How about that? Does that work? Done.
I'll be available the whole week if you guys have questions before the deadline. So yeah, just reach out if anything.
Okay, and let's just make the change right here. Done. And that's probably a really good time to take a break. What do you think? All right, so let's take a break for 20 minutes and we'll come back at 10 to the, or yeah, 10 to the hour. And then we will go through the steps of filing a formal request. And I'll show you recent examples of stuff that I've done, and you can use that as a template. Okay, so I will pause the recording and we'll see you at 10 to. Okay, welcome back, folks. All right, let's continue. I will share my screen. All right, so let's spend the next few minutes just reviewing the assignment. So our new due date is 11:59 p.m. on September 21st, which is next Thursday. And if you have any questions, we're here to help. Alina's been through this before, so she's all the ups and downs, so she will provide excellent guidance. Okay, so let's just go through it, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. So you'll file one formal request for each level of government: federal, provincial, municipal. You will also file 5 requests for previously released records. So you remember the exercise that we did last week where you went through and you filed a number of requests? You can include those if you want. So let's say last week you ended up doing 2 or 3, just add a couple of more and paste everything into a Word document so that I don't have to go hunting. So you can go, so everything will be in one Word document. So all you send me is just one Word document. So it would start off with, say, federal informal requests, 1, an acknowledgement that that it was received, followed by your summary. Okay, so you, like I showed you last week, you just open up a Word document and you write your request, to whom this may concern. I would like access to the records that were identified in the following summaries. Okay. Now, what I would suggest is that it's probably easier to file them with the same department, or you can file them with different departments, right? But all I need is just to see that, oh yeah, there's the request, right? So you went and you filled out the form and then you got an acknowledgement. So they just paste that into a Word document. I need to see 5 of those. I'm not judging whether or not they're any good. It just, if you've done them, you get credit for them. That's it. Okay. And the idea is just for you to get used to doing that. I try to do that at least 2 or 3 times a week because it takes all of 10 minutes and it's low hanging fruit. It's just a really good habit to get into it. And again, it's a way to strategically use the access to information system. Okay, so that's informal. And then, so in addition to that, you will need to file just one formal request to each level of government: federal, provincial, and municipal. Okay. And so when I say copies of correspondence, all I mean, to answer Chloe's question, is just an acknowledgement that yes, they received it. Right. So for an example, I've pasted in an example here that I can show you. Okay, so now these are the formal requests, right? So when you file a formal request, you'll get two acknowledgments, right? One, because you got to pay $5 for the federal requests. So it'll be a receipt, an invoice. This is the invoice. And then in addition to that, you will get a response successfully committed. Successfully submitted. Okay. So, and then here is the actual wording. So obviously this is the Word document. Okay. So when I make my formal request, I go online. I'll show you how to do that. And I attach this Word document. I make my request. And then when I get my formal, and I pay, and then when I get my formal acknowledgement, I just paste this and this, right? So this all becomes one document, right? So that is for and I'll go over the wording of requests in a bit. And then, well, I might as well do it now. So for this one, what am I asking for? Okay, so to whom this may concern, I would like access to all email correspondence from the Director General and above generated from January 2023 to the present regarding objections of Facebook and Google to Bill C-18. Now, this time frame, I'm a little nervous about this, because I filed this request. What's the date on this? I filed this request in June. Okay, so I'm asking for basically 6 months worth of correspondence. That might be too much. I realize that. So that's why I say, if you have any questions about wording or time frame, please feel free to contact me about amendments. So they might come back to me and they might say, well, you might want 6 months of email correspondence, but that's going to lead to delays. And at that point, I'd say, okay, I will reduce the time frame. So maybe I want to reduce the time frame to the closer to the date when there was increasing news about possible pushback coming from Meta and Google. But don't forget that the access to information person is there for you to help you. They have, in policy terms, they have a quote unquote duty to assist. So it's their job to work with you to say, okay, well, what would be a reasonable time frame? Once you come up with that reasonable time frame, then they will send you the revised wording. Once you sign off on it, then the clock starts ticking, right? So when I say the clock starts ticking, legally they have 30 days to get back to you with a response, with an acknowledgement letter. More often than not, they will ask for an extension, and that comes in a separate letter. Okay, so unlike the formal part, the informal request where you've sent those 5 examples, okay, they can get back to you whenever. Typically, you should get something back within a month, but you may not be, right? Whereas here, they have a legal obligation to get back to you within 30 days with an actual letter. Either a letter that they will email to you stating that they've received your request, or just an email. Okay, so now this is just for emailed correspondence. What I also asked for is briefing notes. So it was the same. To who this may concern, I would like all briefing notes. Oh, and just one more thing. So email correspondence from the Director General and above. When you ask for email correspondence, and I'm not suggesting that you do, quite frankly, just ask for briefing notes. Make your life really simple. But if you do want email correspondence, they're going to say, well, wow, there are a lot of people involved in a chain, as we saw in that RCMP memo, right? It started with one person, who submitted it, and it ended up being recommended by another person, right? And between those two people, there are all kinds of other people who are in the email chain. So one of the things that when you're asking for emails, that a really good officer would ask is, do you only want it from, do you only want the emails from the like senior executives, like the deputy minister, assistant deputy minister, or the director general, right? So in this case, when I ask for email correspondence, I only want the correspondence that goes to decision makers, quite frankly. And in the federal government, that's anyone from the director general and above. And that tends to be the case at the provincial level as well. Okay. And if you don't know, then this is why doing the homework is really important. So before you file your request, if you are asking for a database, know what the database is called. If you are asking for a reaction to the topic, know what the topic is. You can send the, the officer. I will often link to the actual article, records, briefing notes that were generated by this article or this policy or whatever, right? Send the link, help them out. They get hundreds of these requests a day, and the more information you can give them, the better. Okay. So this would be, for the purposes of the assignment, let's say that you wanted to craft your own request. This would be one. So that would be your federal, right? Another thing that you could do, and we'll walk through this in a little bit, is you can just ask for like what the government does, what the federal government does is they proactively release briefing note titles. And so what you can do is just, as you did with the informal, you can go through a series of briefing note titles for one department, copy and paste them into a Word document and say, I want access to the briefing notes that have been identified by these summaries. That too would be your federal example. My suggestion, federally, do that. It's really easy. It'll probably take you about 20, 30 minutes, to go through them. Just cut and paste, boom, and send it off. Right. And so all I would want is just the actual titles, like 5 titles. Okay. So that's what I did right here in my example. Okay. So what I tend to do is, let me see if I can, I do everything in a spreadsheet. I'm not suggesting that you do this, right? And so what I did was, I had all of these briefing note titles in a spreadsheet, and I just copied and pasted them. So there is 1, 2, 3, 4. So I copied just the summaries, right, into a Word document. To whom this may concern, I would like access to briefing notes identified in the summaries pasted below. Boom, that's it. Okay. And then here are the transaction approved. So I can look at this and I can go, oh yeah, this is what Chloe asked for. She asked for these briefing note titles and it was approved. Good. You get credit for it. Easy peasy. Okay.
Could
yeah.
you just repeat one more time where specifically we find the briefing note titles for
I will show you that afterwards.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, okay. Why don't we do that now? Should I? Because so let's go back to week 1, where I had all of the links. Okay. Week 1. Okay. So it's under week 1, it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th, 8th, 9th. Oh, hang on. Search briefing note titles. I'll just pop it in the chat. Okay. So these are the briefing note titles. Now, you remember when we were doing this informally, I suggested that you probably want to filter for, okay, let's filter for, I don't know, the Canada Border Services Agency, and we will filter for, you probably want let's say we want the most recent ones. So you filter for 2023. And now the month, you can choose whatever month you want. action required for decision and information. So there's really no difference. I would just choose both. And the addressee is either the minister or the deputy head, including a person appointed to a position of an equivalent rank. Okay, so you remember in the wording of my request when I said deputy general and above, so that would include that could be, a person appointed to a position of an equivalent rank. Okay, so I'm specifying that the addressee is someone in the upper echelons, right, as an executive. So what I've done is I filtered it. I filtered this for the organization and the year. And then if I search, and then so there are 32 records. So what I can do now is I go through, and let's say I want this one. So I'm going to open up hang on here. Let me open up a Word document. Okay. And I'm going to go here and I'm going to say, I want this one. So now on my Word document, I'm going to type my information, right? So David Kai, Canada's server. Okay, my address. Okay. And then here I'm going to like all of your coordinates, but your coordinates are going to be in the form that you're going to be using to send your information, right? And so what you want to do is I would label this number 1 and I would paste it. So this is the first one. This is number 1. Okay. Number 1. And then down here, let's say I wanted say this one here. That one looks interesting. I'll copy that, paste that here, and that's number 2, right? And then I would do 5, 5 of these. And the reason I do 5 of these is because I'm not going to pay $5 for each one of these. I'm going to push the envelope a bit, right? They're the briefing note titles. They know where they are. It's not too difficult for them to find it, right? So I think I can probably get away with 5 of these, right? So when I look at and this might be the federal request, right? So federal request. Okay, so your federal request, I can say 1, 2, 3, right? And then up here, then once you send them, you put you paste your acknowledgement here. So here's your acknowledgement. And then I can see that Chloe has asked for 5 briefing note titles. Here they are. Boom. You get credit for your federal request. Okay. And then here, provincial. Now for provincial, you're probably going to have to craft a request in the manner that I will show you. Okay. But the same thing for provincial, right? And then for municipal, it would be the same thing. And all of this would be in one Word document. So let's say that you did one Word document for federal, one Word document for provincial, one Word document for municipally based. Copy all of those into one master Word document and send that to me. So then when I'm looking at your assignment, I can go provincial, federal, municipal. I don't have to search. I don't have to, and I can see, oh yeah, there's the acknowledgement and there's the wording of the request. Now, what I would be looking for in your wording is First of all, is it the right department? And the second would be, like the time frame, right? So this is what you have to submit. And so how do you do that? Well, if we go back to the syllabus, and the federal government is always changing. Okay, so let me put this in the chat, and I will update this link. I'm actually going to give you time to do this in a little while, okay? So you can actually start your assignment in class, right? So does everyone have this link here? So everyone's screen should look like this. Can I get a thumbs up from everyone? Okay, good, good. Okay, good. All right. So make a request. Okay, so make a so what they stress here is that making a formal request is the last step. It's when you have exhausted every other possibility. Okay, you've tried asking for the information just by contacting the communications people. You've tried mining the proactive releases. You've tried talking to sources. You've done everything. And the only thing left is to file a formal information request. And that is because it takes time, at least a month, more often than not, longer than that. Okay. And we're in the news business. We want stuff immediately. And we're also in an age where we expect to have information instantaneously. We don't want to wait 3 months for something. Okay. Or, if it's the case, as was the situation with the Globe and Mail and the adverse drug reactions, it's a pretty good request. So that story, that information, once you get it, is going to be a good story. Okay. So if it's a good request, it can wait, but more often than not, you want stuff as quickly as possible. So this is the last resort. And so what they stress is that don't use this until you absolutely have to. Okay. So make a request. So you hit the make request tab. You can continue. Okay. You are requesting general records, not personal information, although you could. So it's called the Access to Information and Privacy Act at the federal and provincial level. Is because the flip side to general records is personal information. So, for example, if you had a run-in with a federal department over a visa request or something like that, and you got into a back and forth with the visa officers, you could actually request that information. And as a matter of fact, one of the busiest departments is refugees and immigration, where immigration lawyers are asking for information about their clients who are trying to get visas or whatever the case may be, right? And so they have been mandated by their clients to ask for personal information, or maybe they get their clients to request personal information. So that's what this personal information tab indicates. That's not what you want. You want general records. So if we click on general records, right, then you select an institution. So in this case, it is the Border Services Agency. Now, I exit to a legacy service. And so they stress, Okay. Did you know that your request for corporate record may have already been released, right? So what they're doing here is saying, okay, do your homework. And here's a future guide of frequently answered questions. So do your homework before you do this. But I'm assuming that everyone's done their homework. So you hit next. You've read the privacy, that's fine. You continue, right? And now you got to fill in these fields. So it's the Canada Border Services Agency, Canadian citizen, telephone number format. They require that there be a hyphen. Continue. Oops. Should do it. And it's not the Privacy Act, but it's the Access to Information Act. And I want corporate records. And does this request include personal information? No. So the Canada Border Services Agency is a little different. If it was another institution, and I'll just use another one, for example. So next, and let's say that, yes, I've read it. And let's say I wanted Health Canada. Okay. All right, so I'm back to where I started. I make a request. I select the information, select the institution, Health Canada. Okay, so this is what you're typically going to get. This doesn't work with the Canada Border Services Agency. Theirs is more direct, but typically you'll go through the process that I just described, and you will, I'm not asking you to sign up for an account. You just go to the email validation page and you click on that, and then you will send your email. Okay, so you send your email and you should get a validation. Here it is. There's my validation. Once you get your validation, you click, you verify the email to continue the process. Okay. Now, this is what we saw with the Canada Border Services Agency. The CBSA, for whatever reason, doesn't make you go through this extra step, but most departments will. They'll need your email validation. So Canadian citizen or landed or permanent resident. And then in this case, it's the briefing note titles. Okay. Now here, this is where, and you can do the same thing, right? Like if you wanted to take all these briefing notes, right? And, from your little Word document, you can either paste them into here, or what I would do is I would say, please see the attached Word document. Okay. And then, or if you want, you can just paste in the wording into this, but I like the Word document because I can create that file that I showed you where I have the acknowledgements and I have the request summary. Request format, I want it electronic. Okay, and I go to next. And then I browse for, and I'll just paste in something here. Let's just do that. So let's just say that that was my document. I paste it in here. I describe the file. So it's briefing note titles. Right. And then I add the file to the list that's uploaded. Right. And then I continue. So I can see that it's uploaded here. If you ended up uploading the wrong one, you can also delete it and then upload the correct one. Right. And so I go next. And then this is where I type in all of my contact information. And then English, your preferred method of communication. For me, it's email, but yours might be telephone, text. I prefer email. And then again, I like to identify myself, but if you prefer not to, you can say prefer not to respond. And then next. And so here is a summary of everything. You know, your request, the department, all the stuff that you filled out to make sure if there's anything that needed to be edited, you can edit the contact information or you can edit anything. If you notice that, oh, geez, I uploaded the wrong document, you can edit that, right? So you can edit any one of these sections. But if everything is fine, then you just finish and you pay. And there you go, right? And then once you pay, you'll get an immediate acknowledgement. You'll get two acknowledgements. One is the receipt, right? So one is the receipt. So this is the actual receipt that you'll get. And then the second acknowledgement you get is a confirmation. So just take these two, paste them into the same Word document, and then you're good to go. That's your federal. Okay. And you can see that that's what happened. There's the invoice, right? Here's the acknowledgement. And then here are my briefing note titles. So you can either do one or the other. If you're wording a request, here's the wording of a request. Or if you're briefing note titles, here are your briefing note titles. And so that's how you would do it at the federal level. Okay.
For the request description that you put into your for your request, like what was in that Word document that you put in? Was it just the names of the briefings or like the titles of the briefing?
Oh, these? Yeah, this is just the yeah, it's just these here.
Okay.
Right? So I put it, yeah, I mean, I just put it in a database. So each one of these titles here, like you could just copy and paste this. You don't have to put it into a database, right? So each one of these ID, owner, format, whatnot, is just these titles here.
And then, so all of us should be just specifically asking for briefing notes. Is that correct?
Briefing note titles.
Okay.
Not the briefing note. No, these are the titles that identify the briefing notes.
Okay.
I'm suggesting that you do this because it's easier. But if there's something that you're thinking about and thinking, geez, I want to ask for something that's a little bit more ambitious than this, then please feel free. But you have, an example of suggested wording that you might use.
And then for the formatting for the Microsoft Word document, should we be putting all of the acknowledgement replies first?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You'll get two, right? You'll get this. This is your invoice, right? So that if you're working for a media outlet and you want to get reimbursed, this proves that you paid the $5. And then this is an acknowledgement. Successfully submitted. That's all.
Right. And then, so since we're categorizing it by federal, provincial, and municipal,
Mhm.
so like the 6 federal requests, right? Because the first one would be like the formal one, and then there's 5 informal ones that
Mhm.
they would all go first in the document, right?
I would do all the informal ones first, right?
Oh,
And then I would do the formal ones.
okay. Thank
So-
you.
And you'll get even for the provincial and the municipally based, you'll get the same acknowledgement right away. Because more and more, we do these things online. It used to be a few years ago where you actually had to to mail a letter through snail mail, and you had to actually write a check. How many of you have a checkbook? See? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's my point. So it's a lot better than it used to be. It's a lot more user-friendly. It's not perfect. If it was perfect, then I wouldn't have to spend all this time walking you through the process. But once you get used to it, it's not bad. Andrew.
I think lower down on this PDF, you were talking about specific wording asking for, yeah. So like, I think just above the, yeah.
This one here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it looks like an email. So like you were showing us how to do it federal through a form. So what's like that part? What is that?
Well,
sending
this is
an
the same
email
thing. All I've done,
directly
all
to
I've done in my Word document, right, is let me see if hang on here. So in my Word document, instead of pasting all of these titles, right, I just have the wording of my actual request. And I did the same thing.
yeah. So that would be if we didn't have the briefing note title.
Yeah.
We're
So
just
if you
asking
decided that you
straight up.
wanted to ask for emails or whatever, right, you
Yeah.
would just have you would just have your, like your contact information, the date of the request, and then just your letter here.
Okay.
That's all.
Thank you.
But I would suggest that if you want to do this, then you might want to run it by us just to make sure that you're okay with the wording, that the wording works. But I would really suggest that for the assignment, just do this. It's a lot easier.
Sorry,
Okay.
I just
Yeah.
have a quick question. You said, I was just hoping that you could provide some tips on making sure that documents aren't already released. Like you said, like do your homework to make sure that what you're asking for hasn't been put already. I wonder if there's some like tips and tricks you have to make sure that you're not asking for something that's already been released.
Well, I mean, what you would do is you would go through the previously released, right? So, for example, these completed requests, you would go through the completed requests and you would just find out if this is what you would do, right? So there are 51,069 records, stuff that's already been released. So I would go to this website, right? It's on our syllabus, the previously released. I'll pop it in the chat here. Whoops.
I more mean like, so if you're asking for something that's quite specific, like, some of the databases are quite large, so you might not know that little piece of information that you want. Like, so say if you're not asking for briefing notes and you want like a specific piece of data,
Yeah.
but it's hard to know that,
Yeah.
like, as we said, the databases are huge. Like, is there a way that you can kind of filter through things or?
Well, no, because the data. You mean if you're requesting, you want to find it if the database has already been released?
Not the whole database. Like, say you want a specific piece, like if you're looking at something that's already been released and you're saying, okay, I think this piece of information is missing, like a way to verify that, like that it might not be hidden somewhere. Is there any like kind of?
Probably what I would do is contact the access department, using the list of like the contact list I showed you, and I would just ask them, say, what should I do? Because again, whether you contact them informally or formally, right, they have a duty to assist. Access to information is informal and formal. It's all part of the same. You have a legal right to this stuff.
Okay.
Okay. So if you have any questions or you're not sure, just contact. Say, this is what I'm struggling with. What would your advice be? And they're very good.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So let me continue to share. Okay. So let's go back up to the assignment. All right. So let's just go through the questions. How do I submit my assignment? Information related to the 3 formal requests and 5 informal must be pasted into one Word document, which will be emailed to me. Just email me. Just email. So you email as an attachment. That's it. Okay. Do all the requests have to be on the same topic? No. Do you want every piece of correspondence related to the formal and informal requests? No. All I need to see is that you made the request and it was accepted. I just need proof. Okay. So I don't necessarily, so let's just say that you get something back informally. Because you may get something back in a couple of weeks, right? Do you have to analyze anything? No, you don't, right? Then you could, if it's something of interest, you can use it for another assignment or to freelance or whatever the case may be. Livia.
In your request, I saw something about eligibility, Canadian citizen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a Canadian citizen. I'm a permanent resident. I wonder.
Yeah, that's fine. You're covered.
Okay. All right.
Yep. Okay, and then here we go. This is just more precision. Okay. So what am I marking you on? Well, the actual precision of the request. So like I said, you probably don't want to, if you're asking for briefing notes, you don't want to ask for anything more than a year or I would say 6 months. Okay. So if we go back down to week 2, and at the very end here, under resources, okay, week 2 under resources, an example of a federal formal request. Okay, so this would be a formal request. To whom this may concern, I would like access to records generated from 2018, January 1st, 2018 to January 18, 2019, regarding non-compliance reports issued following inspections of facilities growing marijuana and medical marijuana, right? The records must include, but not be limited to, briefing materials, reports, and PowerPoint presentations. Please exclude email exchange. So if you're going to do a formal request, you can just ask for briefing notes, right? Or if you want to include other things, the typical wording is, here is your time frame. I would suggest no longer than 12 months, a beginning and an end, right? So you can say from, let's say that you end up filing a request this afternoon or next Monday, which is September the 18th. It will be September 1st, September the 18th, 2023, or it would be from, let's say you wanted 6 months. So you go back 6 months and it would be, say, from, February 1st, 2023 to the present. It's okay to say to the present because they know, when you're filing the request. So just a few months. And then if you're going to use wording, try to be as specific as possible. Like, what is the topic that you are, right? So regarding the non-compliance reports issued following inspections of facilities growing marijuana and medical marijuana. So I've done some homework there. And I'm giving them as much detail as possible. And so what are you asking for? Well, the records must include, but not be limited to, and this tends to be the typical wording that we use, the records, and a record, by the way, covers everything. A record is a database. A record is a PDF. A record is a video. A record is an audio. Okay? Don't just ask for documents because you'll only get documents. Right? So if you want records, then specify briefing notes, PowerPoint presentations, etc. And then please exclude emails. Don't want emails because that's going to result in lengthy delays. Okay, so that would be an example of okay, any questions with regards to that?
How do we know if it's like within our rights to ask for certain kinds of information? For example, like if we're asking for if we're asking for information about like a private company, like would that be allowed? Or I don't know.
It depends. It depends. I wouldn't ask for information about a private company because it's private, right? If it has to do with, I would just stick with briefing notes.
But like, for example, like there's some, like I remember like one of the examples that you went over, like it had to do with like Facebook and Google, like the recent thing, Bill C-18, like even though they're like private companies, like their actions have repercussions with.
But it had to do with the discussion about the legislation that affected them, not about them or their business dealings. They're publicly traded companies. We'll learn how to do that. We can go and read their financial statements. Okay. But what I want is a discussion about a piece of legislation that affects them. So what were the briefing notes? What was the chatter going back and forth?
I see. And then also I was wondering, could we quickly go over, like, I know that the process is pretty similar for municipal and provincial.
We will. Yeah. Yep. We will. Yep. Yep. Absolutely. So here's another example. So whenever we're filing requests at any level, like when do we file a request? We file a request if we get a tip that something has happened and there's a briefing note or a piece of information or a database, and our tipster says, ask for this, that, and the other, and you can ask for something specific. But quite often I would ask for briefing notes after something's been in the news, right? So I probably will be asking for briefing notes having to do with the decision to take the GST off the housing measures that the Liberals came up with after the Liberal caucus. So what briefing notes were generated either before or after? What was the chatter? Okay, so that's something that's specific. You may have remembered a story about, and this is under week 2. Okay, so this is under links. And you may remember a story about LGBTQ travelers being warned. Ottawa warns LGBTQ travelers they could be hit by US state laws. Okay. Global Affairs Canada has updated its travel advisory for the United States warning LGBTQ people that some state laws may affect them on their travels. Some states have enacted laws and policies that may affect, okay? Check relevant state laws, said the new advisory, posted Tuesday morning. So, okay, that looks interesting. So you go to the advisory. And there it is. Okay. This is unusual for global affairs to do this. Okay. So I'm thinking, okay, so that's the story, right? The story is on the advisory. But I'm kind of thinking, you know what? There must have been a discussion like this just didn't happen out of the blue. There must have been a discussion. So what I did was I filed a request. And now I had to go back and forth, but this is the email chain. And this was my initial request. Okay. I would like access to records, including but not limited to briefing notes and the email correspondence. Right. Now, the reason I asked for email correspondence here is because it's a very tight time window. It's a very tight frame. Okay. Prepared before and after the LGBTQ advisory regarding U.S. travel was added to the website on August the 23rd. Okay, so it's a very tight window, a very tight time frame. So yes, I would ask for email correspondence because I want to know there must have been a back and forth. And maybe the back and forth is not in the briefing notes, but in the email correspondence. And then we had a bit of a back and forth, and they said, well, you know, that wording isn't great. And so this is what they suggested. Is what we came up with. All records, including but not limited to briefing notes and email correspondence, excluding those from the public. So their question to me was, well, do you want everything? I mean, do you want, or just want internal? And I said, oh yeah, okay, well, that doesn't, yeah, I don't want this stuff here. So excluding from the public, because it may have been that there were complaints. What sparked it was complaints from public. Okay. But I don't want that. If I wanted that, I might ask for that in a separate request. Okay, so that was amended. So for you, there might be a little bit of a back and forth. I don't need that because that will come after you've done the assignment, right? But there may be a back and forth, and you should engage in that process, even though your assignment has done. Engage in the process, and if you have any questions, Elena and I are here to help. Okay, so that would be an example. Okay, so Chloe, to your question, and these here, this is a checklist, right? So these are the kinds of records that you can get, and this is a good checklist that you can go through and ask. Okay, so I won't bother going over that now, but you can review that, right? And these are just 10 ways to improve your searches, right? So look to the headlines for ideas, as I did. Check the relevant websites and info and department holdings. So the other thing that is probably going to come in handy, and I'm just going to scroll back up here to the first week. And my apologies for going back and forth, but I did put all the links on the first page. But here we have information about programs and holdings. Okay, and I'll pop this link in the chat to make it easy to. Okay, so at the federal level, and there is a similar database at the provincial level, but this is an inventory of the kinds of records that the department holds. So if we take a look at Health Canada, for example, okay, Health Canada. So general information about the department, its responsibilities, okay, its programs and activities, right? And the kinds of records it produces. So if you're not sure, if you're going to, be filing federal requests, this inventory of information holdings is key, and it's part of doing your homework. Right? All right. So Chloe asked a question about provincial and municipal. So under resources, under the second week, I've got examples that I added last night. So an example of a provincial request. If you click here. Okay, so this is when I filed. So I'm going to work from the bottom up, because the first thing that I did was I created a little Word document, right? There's all my information here. And this was my request. And so for the provincial and municipally based requests, you are going to have to write out a request. But I would suggest that you use the same guidance that I've articulated for the federal request. So here, to whom this may concern, I would like access to records, including but not limited to ministerial briefing notes prepared from January 1st, 2023 to the present regarding the provincial climate change impact assessment report that was posted, should be posted publicly on the province's website the week of September the 11th. If the time frame leads to extensions, please let me know ASAP, and I'd be willing to make amendments. Thanks in advance for your cooperation. Right? What am I reacting to? Well, the government buried the report. So there must have been some kind of impact, some kind of discussion when they got the report. Right? So I may be over ambitious. Maybe I should have only asked for briefing notes, but I kind of suspect that there was discussion in the email correspondence as well, right? Warnings, red flags, like we should really be releasing this. Is it an idea for us to sit on, right? So whenever this comes out, it's going to be a potential story depending on what I get. Okay, so, and then these are just the acknowledgements. Okay, so this would be my provincial request. So where do I go for my provincial request? And again, I will just this is okay. I'm going to put this in the chat. Again, all of these requests are on the links for week number 1, but I'll just put them here just for your ease. So you do have a directory of records here, right? So if you wanted, okay, freedom of information requests. Okay, make a freedom of information request. Okay, so you can submit a freedom of, if you wish to access general records, make your own personal information. So again, the same thing happens here. If you want to ask for your own information, you can do that. Okay, how to submit a freedom of information request. Okay, before you make a request, identify the type of record you need. The directory of records describes the kinds of information held by provincial ministries under FIPA, right, which is the Freedom of Information and Privacy Act. So here's the directory of records. you type in the ministry, okay? And you can get a directory of different records that they produce, okay? Okay, so request by mail, complete the access to information request form. So you can see here that it kind of walks you through, right? So freedom of information request, how to submit an FOI request, and it walks you through how to do that. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, right? So step 3 is you can complete an access to information form. Okay, so I'm here, and forms, links, and information. So I would prefer to use a link. So I click the link, and here it is, and it walks me through. So I access to general records, not my own personal, although you can if you want. Here you can identify the institution. Okay, so it's the same drop-down menu that we saw at the federal level. This is what I'm looking for. Make sure that you send it to the correct institution, and that's where your homework comes in. So if you are, as I alluded to last week, a common mistake that folks made last year was what, Alina, when it came to education?
Yeah, so something we noticed was there is the Ministry of Colleges and Universities, and then there is the ministry responsible for like high school and primary schools. I don't remember what the name of the department is.
Education.
There you go.
Yeah.
And so students would send in a request, and it would have like good wording, but they would send in a request for information from universities and colleges to the Ministry of Education, which does not answer for these records.
So if you want information about universities and colleges, then you do not want to send it to education. You want to send it to the Ministry of Colleges and Universities. Okay. So just make sure that you submit it to the proper. So I wanted environment. Okay. And so next, then your name. Okay. And then next. So it's the same form as the federal system, right? And then here. So what I did was I cannot append the Word document here. So all I did was I pasted the description in my Word document here, right? And receive a copy, not the original. And then I specify the time period. But the time period I've already specified in my request. Okay, so the time period, where are we now? The time period I specified right here, right? From January 1st, 2023, okay, to the date that I filed the request, which was a couple of days ago. Okay, so that's what I specified in here. And then what I did was I just copied this. Okay, I copied this and I pasted it just into here. And then I just continue and then I pay, right? And then when I get the acknowledgements, right? So in my little Word document, right? I'll get the acknowledgement. So I get the last prompt that I get is actually on the page, and it says, "Thank you for your request, summary, blah blah blah." Right. So I paste that, okay, and then in my email, I will actually get a formal emailed acknowledgement from the general ministry, and I will paste that into the Word document as well. Right. So this is now the reason that I do this is because you'll notice that when you get the formal request with the formal acknowledgement, okay. All right, yeah. So here we can see that the description is blanked out. So if you don't do this, if you don't do what I've done, right, which is to include your summary in here, when you get the information, when you get the acknowledgement back from the province, okay, they don't include they remove the actual wording of the request, which is kind of stupid to protect privacy. So if you don't do this, right, I have no idea what you've asked for, none whatsoever. So that's why you have to include it in the manner that I've pointed out, right? The summary and the acknowledgements. So is that clear? Okay, this isn't, so if you don't include this, I have no idea what you've asked for. Okay, and the last, and this might be the trickiest. So the municipally based. When I say municipally based, the temptation is to ask the City of Toronto for everything. Well, if I wanted to know about online hate incidents at TMU, at Toronto Metropolitan University, would I ask the City of Toronto? Who would I ask? It's not a trick question, folks. Who would I ask?
It'd be the Toronto Police.
You could ask maybe the Toronto Police, but maybe
The university.
The university. I mean, and the only reason that I hesitated for the police, Chloe, that's not a bad answer, but it could be that the university did not report the incident to the police. Only, Lena, as you well know, right? It's only if the incident was reported to the police, then they would keep, they would maybe keep information on that. But if it's in-house, then the only institution that would have that information is Toronto Metropolitan University. So Toronto Metropolitan University, so when it comes to municipal, the reason I stress municipally based is it's not a request to the City of Toronto, unless you wanted to know about garbage pickup or things that are under the City of Toronto's jurisdiction. And this is where the homework comes in, right? Do your homework, because they're not going to, if you file a request for, hate incidents at Toronto Metropolitan University, they're not going to come back to you and say, you've got the wrong, they're going to thank you very much and we'll get back to you in due time, but they're not going to tell you right away that you've sent it to the wrong place. So you will have wasted, a month figuring that, yeah, I've got this great request and it turns out that you've sent it to the wrong place. Okay. So when I say municipally based, I mean those institutions that are covered by the provincial law, but are municipally based. So what am I talking about? Universities, hospitals. What would be some other examples? School boards. What might some other examples be of municipally based?
Would public charities count?
No, that information is actually public. And when we talk about open data, I'll show you how you can find that information. But if you wanted information about a particular charity, it would be to the Canada Revenue Agency, which is responsible for charities. Okay. So universities, hospitals, the health authorities that are responsible for the institutions within its catchment area. Okay, so the health authority that is responsible for the Scarborough General Hospital, for St. Mike's Hospital, et cetera, et cetera. School boards, universities. Okay, all of those municipally based institutions. Police, right? They're municipally based, but they're covered by provincial legislation. And if you want to know how to file a request with them, just go, Toronto Metropolitan University, Freedom of Information. It'll take you right to the site itself. So to give you an example of the municipally based, speaking of TMU, this is what I ended up doing. Okay, so, and we'll go to the bottom and we'll work, and we'll work back. Oh. Okay, so yeah, this is a bit involved here. So I wanted, okay, this was my request. Toronto Metropolitan University, I would like access to internal records, including but not limited to email correspondence generated between January 1st, 2021 to the present. And I filed this a while ago, but I just got it back now. Regarding the name change from Ryerson University to Toronto Metropolitan University. If including of email correspondence leads to delays, I'd be willing to treat them as separately. And you can see that I had to clarify fairly recently, right? Because then they got back to me and they said, well, you know, this is too general regarding the name change. Okay, so what do you mean? You mean concerns, problems, turmoil, right? So then I had to, but if you just did this for a municipally based, that would be fine. The thing that I would be looking for is that your time frame is not more than a year. If your time frame is 5 years, you're not going to get anything anytime soon. Okay, so I'm looking for your time frame, which is reasonable. I'm looking to the fact that you sent it to the correct institution. If those things are fine, I might have some little, you know, tips and feedback, but those are the main things that I'm looking for, right? Use a reasonable time frame, use good wording, be precise as you can. And the precision denotes the fact that you've done your homework. That's what that means. It means that you haven't just, you know, fired something off for the purposes of completing an assignment. You've actually thought about it, which is why I'm giving you folks extra time. Okay. And so what TMU did was they came back and they used different sections of the law to exclude things. They didn't charge me anything. And so they itemized what they released. So full disclosure was a PowerPoint presentation, right? Emails didn't get, this document didn't get, email didn't get, email didn't get, email didn't get. Okay, and they highlight the section of the act they use to exclude the information. So you can see that most of the stuff I asked for, I didn't get. Okay, and you know, I mean, you can look through this if you want. You know, the PowerPoint presentation is, I mean, there's nothing here, basically, right? There's really nothing. And then the emails that I got were just a couple of formulaic emails sent out to alumni. So at the end of the day, you know, and so because now, you know, the name change is now 2 years old, unless I got a tip that there was something I should be asking for, I'll probably just let it drop. But the reason that I included this is that it's the same thing, right? So here's the, you know, I can look at this and I can see the wording of the request. I can see everything. Okay. So again, municipally based probably does not mean the city of Toronto. It means a municipally based institution. So I know that we're over we're past 3 o'clock. Any quick questions? So what I can do is if anyone needs to go, you can certainly go. I'll keep recording these questions, but if you have questions, I'll hang around for another few minutes. Marina.
Okay, so 2 questions. So for a municipally based institution, the city of Toronto is a municipally based institution. So we can still we can still submit requests through them.
Yeah, but it would be, that's right. But it would be for an area that the municipality is responsible for.
Right.
So it's not responsible for hate incidents or the TMU name change.
Mm-hmm.
It is responsible for garbage collection. It is responsible for housing development, zoning. It is responsible for the, you know, light rail, for
Yep.
the TTC, et cetera. Although the TTC
TTC
has
is
its own freedom of information, so it is municipally based, right?
Okay.
And the TTC is an excellent one.
Yeah, so follow up to that. So when finding like inspiration for a request, so for the federal request, we have the briefing note titles where we can get inspo. For a provincial request, we have the directory of records to get inspiration.
Mhm.
For a municipal request, is the best way to just simply read the local news of wherever you're looking to submit a request to?
Yeah, I mean, I would go, if you're interested in the TTC, I would go to its website and see what it, so it might be, for example, I would suspect that if something happens to you at the TTC, you would have a way to report that incident, right? So look at and you would fill out a form. They would have a form there. So look at the form and you're thinking, geez, if they collect this information, it's kept in a database somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So in the form, in the form, like you're not going to get the name, but you might get the date of the incident. You might get, what happened, et cetera, et cetera. And so you think, they keep data on this. So you might ask for a database of incidents from a particular date to a particular date. Because you know that they keep that information because that is on the website. So that's what I mean by doing the homework. Now, you might get into a bit of a back and forth but at least you know that they keep that information and you know that it's the TTC.
Okay. And then municipal institutions, is it okay if we do our hometown?
Absolutely.
Cool.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Totally.
Better.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Kiara.
I was just looking for some clarification on how exactly we do the municipal request. So I know through federal and provincial, there were those forms that we fill out. For doing municipal, is it just that we send the email, like we find like the email address that we're contacting it?
It will be
to...
So for municipal, go to the easiest thing to do is just, if you're interested in TTC, go TTC Freedom of Information, or whatever, because there's so many municipal institutions, the list would be exhaustive, right? And usually they will have the same mechanism online that you can, like they'll have a form that you can fill out and you can pay electronically. And if you're having any problems, and I can't stress this enough, contact us. Okay? Contact us. We're happy to walk you through, answer any questions, troubleshoot, whatever, right?
If I could clarify for the municipal, there's always going to be a portal. Like it's not going to be you sending an email to somebody with a request. If it could be a City of Toronto, it'll be a portal like the municipal. If you go to TMU, it's going to be another portal. So it's always going to be through some kind of like online form. It's never going to be like a private email or an email address that you send the request to.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me give you an example, right? So I'll just share my screen again. And so I just typed in TMU, Freedom of Information, and here it is right here. Okay, so, or if you type in TTC, Freedom of Information. Can't type. Freedom of Information. There it is. Okay, and it'll walk you through. So as Alina correctly points out, they all have a portal because they're all covered by the Act. In this case, municipally based institutions, but they're covered by the Provincial Act. And they all have portals that'll walk you through. Request form. Okay, you have to pay a fee, but request form. So I've never actually filed a request with the TTC, but here you go, right? And you can, so it's all the same, right? You just sort of, all the information and boom, send it off, and you can probably pay online and you're good to go. For my money, the best requests are municipally based. That's when you get, because you're not dealing with The main thing that, the main exemption you're dealing with is privacy. But you're going to get stuff. You're going to get really good stuff. So if there is, any incident, like locally, like a series of attacks or whatever, right? It's really good to file requests because you're more often than not going to get stuff that you can, for assignments, you can freelance or whatever the case may be. A number of you have gigs outside of TMU, right? This is a tool that you can use to tell really good stories. Okay. And I'm going to stop sharing. And I know that I'm past my time, but does anyone have any further questions?
David, I'm just wondering, when do you plan to share this video recording for this class?
This afternoon.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I add just two things I noticed on the form when you open the TTC form? At the bottom of that form, it says mail your request to and an address. Sometimes from municipal requests that I filed, that's dated. So if you give them a call and you ask if they have like a e-transfer or whatever, a line that you can do it digitally, they probably do. So like TMU, for example, if you were interested in doing a request for TMU, which would be fairly easy, they will give you a physical form and you have to fill it out and they say you have to mail it. That's not true. They actually have, through some weird, like you have to go through like the biggest like workarounds, but they do have like a digital way of submitting it. So the best way, if they ask you to do it physically, is just to give them a call and ask if you can do it digitally. You probably have it already.
Yeah. No, that's an excellent point. It's, the process municipally is a little messier. Okay, it's not that straightforward, but when in doubt, just phone and they'll walk you through it.
Yeah,
or you can contact one of us.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't make that many municipal requests, so Alina's probably a better person than me just because she's done it. I did TMU. I've done a few, but I tend to do mostly federal, but now with Doug Ford in power in Ontario, I'm doing lots of provincial. So.
And just one more note, if anyone's interested in doing hospitals for their municipal request, hospitals do require, most of them require you to do it physically. So you have to send a literal letter with a check, or usually I feel like they'll let you do cash because I've done cash before. But it would be a physical letter. They don't have a digital platform.
Okay. Any other questions? How are we feeling about this assignment?
Sorry, I just have a quick question about doing hospitals. Say you wanted to not just reach out to one hospital, but you wanted to reach out to all the hospitals that are in a city. You'd contact the Ministry of Health for that city, correct?
Well, it depends what you want, right? So I probably would make that a provincial request to the health ministry.
Okay. And then,
right?
And then kind of narrow your search if you're doing municipal to one hospital.
Well, if you wanted something that's related to that particular hospital, then you could either do the hospital or the health authority that is responsible for that and other hospitals in its catchment area.
Okay.
So this is where I say you have to do the homework, right?
Yeah.
As a note,
yeah, go ahead.
Just as a note, because I did hospitals when I was working at the Investigative Journalism Bureau, we were looking, for example, for data that is provincially required to send in from every hospital on like certain records that they have, but we had to ask individual hospitals for that, unfortunately. So it wasn't a provincial request. But now that I'm thinking about it, since it's provincially mandated for each hospital to give it to the ministry, it might be worth a phone call to see if you can do it in one request. So it depends, yeah.
Yep. Okay. Any other questions? I'll send once this is posted, the video is posted, I'll send a note. So one quick question. I thought that I was using your TMU account for the recording last week. Did that not work? Did you guys not get the YouTube notice?
I think we got the notice, but when we clicked on it, it wasn't available because something about the organization administrator hasn't given us access to YouTube.
Okay. I'm going to give it another shot, right? So I'm going to, you know what? I'll just make it public. That's okay. It's just easier. Okay, that way you can see it right away and there's no messing around. So let's just do that, okay? I'm not quite sure what happened. So next week we do open data. But between now and then, if you have any questions about access to information, please let us know. Are you guys feeling okay about this assignment?
I'm very confused. But I'm hoping that Alina can send that document.
What are you confused about? What are you confused about?
The federal part with the 5 notes. That's the part that I'm getting stuck on.
Just you just go to that portal and just choose 5, paste them all into a Word document, and but you can do each one individually. So remember last week, you can do each one and you will get a formal acknowledgement that you have filed that informal request.
No, not for informal. For formal with the briefing notes for the federal level.
Yeah.
That's the part I'm confused about.
Well, what I'm suggesting, my suggestion is that it's going to cost you less money. I'm suggesting a way that you don't have to pay $5 if you send 5, right? I'm suggesting to do it this way so that you don't pay $25. You pay $5 for 5 requests.
Right.
So you just paste the 5 into a document, into a Word document, right? You copy that, and then you go to the portal that allows you to pay online, and you just upload that Word document, and you say,
I've got that part. I've got the process. I don't know what the notes are related to. Like, why am I getting?
Well, these are just briefing notes that are written, like we explained last week. Briefing notes are prepared for ministers all the time, right? For any particular topic, right? Literally hundreds of briefing notes are prepared, right? And so this is just a list of titles of briefing notes. So we used to ask for titles of briefing notes, and then from those briefing notes, we would cherry pick. Okay, so what the federal government has done is proactively, it released those lists of briefing note titles. So you can look at the titles and go, oh, that looks interesting. I'll ask for that one.
So notes related to a specific topic is what you're saying.
As much as the briefing note titles will give away that topic. Okay. But there should be enough information in the briefing note title for you to go, oh, that's interesting. I'll take that one. I'll take that one. It's like shopping, right? I'll take that one. You put it in your basket, you send it off, you pay your $5, and that's it. That's your federal request.
Okay.
What happens when we just request one briefing title?
You could, but I would request more than one.
Yeah,
you might
because
as well.
It's worth your time, I guess.
You might as well.
Or, because it's all going to be $5 anyway, I'm guessing.
Yeah, you might as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will provide a recap of the briefing note example in writing, and just like other examples covered in this class, just so you guys have like it in print. But yes, I am like available whenever next week to hop on a Zoom with anyone if you need any help. I'm here.
Yeah, and that recap, Alina, send it to me, and I'll also post it on our website. Okay. Bottom line is that if you have any problems, talk to us. It'll be smooth. You'll learn, right? There's no need to stress. Okay. All right. I'm going to stop the recording. Have a wonderful weekend, and we will talk next week, if not sooner. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.